Tony Stark is continuing to lose. And this is the Comicstorian Complete Story Series, featuring the continuation of the 2022 Invincible Iron Man with issues 4, 5, and 6. Benny originally recorded this for members only, but now everyone gets to enjoy.
The day after Tony Stark discovered that someone was impersonating him and trying to ruin his image, the new owners of Stark Unlimited called a press conference. Feilong stepped forward, promising the press that he, along with Nimrod, Dr. Stasis, and everyone at Orchis, promised to take Stark Unlimited's tech and get it out into the world. Use it for the betterment of all mankind. Tony steps out of the crowd, glaring at Feilong. "Ah, Tony, so glad you received my message. We're going to have some fun, aren't we?" Feilong says with a smile. Tony continues to glare at him as everyone cheers for the purchase of Stark Unlimited. "My neighbor Morella Marcus and my friend Zhang Wei, they will be avenged," Tony tells him. But Feilong merely smiles, walking down the podium, giving an interview to the local media about how he wants to help usher Stark Unlimited into the future, how he believes that he can restore it to its old glory since Tony stepped away from his company and namesake. But Tony steps out of the crowd of celebrators. "Only the bravest try hostile takeovers on Stark companies," Tony tells him. The crowd spreads out around them, surprised by this confrontation. "You guys should consider fighting over pink sheets," someone shouts, and Feilong shakes his head. "Stark would never stand a chance. No, we won't be doing that," Feilong says, but Tony shrugs, motioning to the door. "Maybe we will. Let's step inside. Unless you're scared of having the shortest tenure as a Stark CEO in history," Tony suggests, and Feilong follows him outside where Tony has left his armor. He steps into it. "Two dead I know about. Call it quits now, make restitution, or prepare for war," Tony warns him, but Feilong shakes his head. "War's over, Tony. You lost," the villain tells him. "What do you even want with Stark Unlimited?" Tony asks as he slides his faceplate down. "I want to make it great again," Feilong states, asking why Tony should even care since he walked away from the company a long time ago. But Tony doesn't answer. "I see. The X-Men's Fantasy Island was too tough for you to take down, so now you're switching lanes, thinking I'll be easier," Tony tells him, and Feilong just laughs, explaining that the mutants have already been defeated. They just don't know it yet. Tony stares at his enemy, trying to think of a way to get under his skin, and he thinks about the billionaire's overconfidence as he hovers into the air. Maybe he has abandonment issues. "You know the difference between us. I might not like the answer, but I know where my old man is," Tony says, and Feilong glares at him. Suddenly, he opens his mouth and fires a blast of green energy that slams into Tony, knocking him away, sending him crashing into a nearby car. Feilong stalks forward, his mouth still smoking from the blast. "I should know myself better than that. Well played, Stark. That was almost an unforced answer." He looks back at the gathering crowd, calling them over to witness his defeat of Iron Man. Tony stands, firing his own energy blast, which deflects off of Feilong's high-tech business suit. "Is that the best you could do, Tony?" Tony stares for a moment before turning and hitting a nearby fire hydrant with a small laser cutter. "No," he says as a high-pressure water stream comes flying out, slamming into Feilong, knocking him away. Tony moves forward, ripping a parking meter out of the ground, preparing to swing it. "You're legitimately very smart, but you don't seem to understand how angry you've made me. You shed innocent blood to get to me. I don't have a lot of friends, and you took one," he says, slamming the parking meter into Feilong, knocking him across the street. Feilong slams into a bull statue, his fancy suit doing little to shield him from the impact. "Did everyone record that, or do we need another take?" Tony asks the gathered crowd as he fires a barrage of non-lethal rounds at the enemy. He holds up his hand, activating the suit's EMP burst, stopping all wreckers within the area. "Impressive," Feilong says as he staggers to his feet, and Tony raises his faceplate as he lowers to the ground, grabbing a hold of Feilong's collar. "I've got a few surprises with armor sleeves that you don't even know about. I get it. You had your heart broken. The mutants stole Mars from you, and you want your pound of flesh. You're mad at me for some delusion I held Mars. But I'll be damned if I let you use my creations to hurt anyone," Tony tells him. Feilong lashes out, trying to punch Tony, but he catches the blow, crushing Feilong's hand, dropping the billionaire to the ground. "I hope you can avoid orthopedic surgery, but if you can't, I understand the Stark Unlimited health plan is stellar. I trusted Zhang Wei to institute it," Tony says, lowering his faceplate and beginning to fly away. Gritting his teeth, Feilong watches as Tony flies off. Oh, Tony, I think perhaps you're the one I've been waiting for. Finally, I have a worthy nemesis, Feilong calls out. Later, back at Emma Frost's home on Krakoa, the powerful mutant enjoys a cocktail on her balcony, and she looks up as Tony Stark floats down near her. I've been expecting you. You're quite late, Tony, she says with a smile, and Tony nods. Is the enemy of my enemy my friend, Miss Frost? Later, Tony and Emma ride horses around Hellfire Bay on Krakoa. As Tony explains to her that Feilong told him about the mutants already being defeated, Emma glances at him. Have you considered that he bit off more than he can chew with Krakoa in his Mars dreams and is zeroing in on manageable prey? Emma asks him, and Tony smiles at her and nods. Consider me humbled, Emma. But Emma explains that she does have information for him. She looks up as Sunfire flies through the sky, landing before them. Our guest has come for a download of your altercation with Feilong on Phobos. May I? Emma asks, and Sunfire grants her permission, and Emma links the three with the memories of Sunfire's fight. He explains that he first encountered Feilong on Phobos and quickly learned that he was no longer a normal man. Wait, he arrived on Mars with powers? How can that be? Emma explains that Feilong used the journey from Earth to remake his DNA. He harvested cosmic rays through a ruby quartz lens. It gave him abilities not unlike Cyclops. He has held a grip on Phobos, and our mutant cousins on Mars are amused by the situation. For now, Sunfire explains. But Emma thanks him for his help, and Sunfire nods to Tony and leaps off once more. Alone, Tony asks his boss AI to bring in his armor. Thank you, Emma. I owe you a fair warning. This guy's playing chess. Be careful. But Emma smiles. I enjoy the game. The saucy outfits were always meant to distract from the gambits I played as White Queen. She says as she turns her horse away, and Tony leaps into the sky. As he flies away from the mutant island, he asks Boss to look into the transportation logs for Stark Unlimited in the last quarter. Looking through the logs, Tony is shocked to see that Feilong has been working with Stark Unlimited for some time, and a large amount of metal has been going to a warehouse in Texas. Punch it, Tony orders Boss. Meanwhile, Feilong has discovered something else. Looking through the Stark Unlimited database, he has discovered that there are 24 serial numbers for projects that haven't been digitized. His aide explains that those serial numbers belong to the physical objects that were left to Tony by his father and are stored in a warehouse in Texas. Yet another inheritance abandoned by my predecessor, Feilong says with a smile before ordering his aide to get them a flight to Texas. Later, Feilong and the aide walk through the warehouse in Texas, shocked by the treasures left by Howard to his son. But Feilong finds the real treasure, hiding beneath the canvas of a priceless painting. He finds several films left by Howard. My God, Tony will be... The aide begins to state, but Feilong glances back at him. Tony will be unaware of my discovery. This is Stark Unlimited property, and I am its master. Later, Feilong sits in a darkened theater, sipping from a soda while he watches Howard's last messages to his son. Howard tells his son about some important work that he was doing with Adam Brashear, a man whose work helped Howard make tremendous breakthroughs. It all arrived in my company. You should have read his work. I've made some of the most important leaps in my career due to it, Howard says, explaining that he is still working on achieving his greatest prize, a medal that isn't on a periodic table because it comes from another universe. If I'm successful, this could be more important than iron was to our ancestors. Howard explains, the film shifting, and Howard giving his final words as he pulls a spacesuit on and steps through a strange portal. This will be your real inheritance, son. Goodbye, Tony. I hope to see you again. And you grow up to be the kind of man who will understand why I had to do what I needed to do for humankind, Howard says before disappearing. Meanwhile, Tony Stark has arrived at the same Texas facility later that night. He pushes open the doors to a different warehouse, leaving his armor to hold the doors open. Unprotected, he walks into it, looking up in shock at the drones that are building the first Stark Sentinel system. Suddenly, a blast of energy hits him from behind and he falls to his knees, glancing over his shoulder to see Feilong standing there with a smile. A drone hovering nearby while he holds a burning trash can and the last of the home movies. What timing and luck you have, Mr. Stark! I just completed a deep dive into you and your father. I discovered your true inheritance. Feilong says before tossing the last film into the fire. But Tony is barely even listening as he struggles towards his nearby armor. "What are you doing?" he gasps, but Feilong moves forward, kicking him in the stomach. "You don't have my permission to crawl yet!" he snaps, releasing his anger because of Tony and the other Avengers abandoning Mars, which left it open for the X-Men to take it over years later. "You had it, and you just walked away!" Tony nods and looks up. "Earth needed us." But Feilong shakes his head. "No, it doesn't! It needs me! I learned so much from the messages that your father left you. A fascinating theoretical discovery from an undiscovered piece of metal of the periodic table. It could remake the world!" He grabs Tony, pulling him close. "He left clues to something wonderful, and you'll learn of my discovery when the rest of the world does." Feilong helps him up and pushes him towards his armor, admitting that he burned everything from Howard. "No, you're bluffing," Tony gasps as he gets into his suit. But Feilong opens his mouth, hitting Tony with a blast of energy, knocking him away from the door. "I'm not. And if your father's right, I'm going to change the world. Again," Feilong says as the doors close behind him. He turns it back to the Stark Sentinel and orders it to conduct a weapons test, targeting Iron Man. The Sentinel stomps through the door, hitting him with an energy blast, and Tony tries to fight back, knowing that he can't take on his armor in that size, and he quickly flees the scene. As he flies away from the Stark Sentinel, Feilong steps out of the warehouse watching him, a smile on his face. "Run, Tony! Tell the world what's coming! We will see which one of us the world will cheer," Feilong says. Later, Tony returns to his cab depot, thinking back on his previous adventures against Emma Frost, when suddenly a memory pops into his mind and he moves over to his computer, continuing the memoir that he's been writing. He remembers an event from the 80s, when he was asked by the Department of Defense to take a look at a possible mole in Stark Unlimited and deliver some Psyblocker tech to Nick Fury. Traveling to New York in this era, Tony managed to kill two birds with one stone, learning that the mole was a woman named Hazel Kendall. In New York, he learned that Hazel's real identity was that of the mutant telepath Emma Frost, the White Queen. Iron Man tried to retrieve the Psyblocker tech, but the White Queen had gained mental control over several of the New York supervillains and used them to distract Iron Man long enough to make him forget her fake identity. As Tony finishes the chapter in his book, he realizes that the doors to the cab depot are opening, and he looks back as War Machine comes stomping into the room, a bag of weapons thrown over his shoulder. "Any problems?" Tony asks Rhodey, who shakes his head. "Not one. I got in and out undetected and got everything you wanted," he says as he hands Tony a rifle. "Last chance to change your mind. After today, there's no turning back. You'll be a wanted criminal if this goes wrong." Rhodey warns him, and Tony shakes his head, priming the weapon. "I'll be a criminal even if today goes right, but there's no choice. I'll be damned if I let these Sentinels come online. Stark Unlimited must die," Tony says with determination.
And that was Invincible Iron Man 4, 5, and 6, leading up to Tony's involvement in the Fall of X. We still have multiple episodes in this series that Benny had recorded, so make sure your notifications are turned on for when those are released. Stay safe out there, and rest in peace, Benny. We miss you.